Good afternoon, and thank you for your presentations. In relation to the planning, I suppose, the first question is, I'm not totally sure, even though I've dealt with planners for years in the local authority, what qualifications a planner has. And the reason I'm asking that is, have you seen a change, I suppose, in when you're getting your qualification, of a focus on making sure that people are aware of issues around disability, accessibility, and for disabled and autistic people? And I'm sure there are many autistic planners. It just brings to mind, I think it was an architect actually that gave evidence at the Disability Matters Committee, and she said she had been an architect for years, and then through an accident acquired disability, and she suddenly realised that what she had been designing was not suitable at all for disabled people. And the Part M guidelines, they only at the moment really have look for a minimum standard where we recognise that buildings are wheelchair visitable rather than livable, and hopefully they will be reviewed under the new legislation. So just asking, is there more of an awareness and a focus on ensuring that there is a universally designed or universal design to buildings and public spaces within planner? And also, I suppose the issue of, and you made reference to it there, of the shortage of planners as well. How severe is that? Again, talking to a senior planner in my local area, he was saying they advertised for a senior planner recently and they got no applications whatsoever, whereas maybe 20 years ago they've been getting 20 people looking for the position. And we know the issues then with on board Penala, and in the middle of a housing crisis, that's the last thing we need, is being held up on those issues there because of a lack of personnel, I suppose workforce planning. So just, that's my first question.
Certainly from, I've been doing planning for 25 odd years or thereabouts, and certainly my education there has been an awareness of it, but it was generally speaking more on around physical seeing disabilities. And from travelling abroad and kind of from reading publications in the UK and the States, there would be a higher awareness of unseen disabilities, particularly in design of big, large, major infrastructure or public buildings, projects and all that sort of stuff, particularly in the UK, like when they design, just for example, very recently, when they built the new Tottenham Hotspur Stadium over in White Hart Lane, they actually built in a sensory space, so that somebody who might be, would find it very difficult to deal with crowds, 50,000 people or whatever it is, they're actually fully inclusive through that type of model. And that's more and more, and certainly the education, I can't speak for what type of education architects would be getting, but from the planner's perspective, we're dealing with probably zoom out kind of space, public realm, public spaces, that type of thing. So there would be an increasing awareness for sure about finishes, visuals, wayfinding signage, the things that people with autism would find it easier to navigate, and the type of predictability, which is what people with autism would want to see when moving around spaces. And I suppose in order to try and improve awareness of that, we had a participation of Stuart Nielsen, who is a director of As I Am in our CPD, because originally our CPD was kind of set out to deal with kind of more universal access, often taught as physical disabilities, but try and introduce the unseen aspect. We had him participating in our CPD, and maybe Sean, you might talk about the other parts of the question around kind of resources.
Yeah, Deputy, just in terms of the qualifications and the resources and the shortage. So we accredit planning schools in UCD, TU Dublin, and UCC, and it's typically a master's or else a 4-year undergraduate programme. The way that we work that is that they're accredited every 5 years against education guidelines, and the last education guidelines that we set were in 2019. So they will be reviewed shortly, and I guess the way that it's laid out is there is an emphasis on access, additional needs. There is a number of core things that planning schools, that every planner has to have coming out, I guess. And then there's optional things, and I think we'll be looking at that now, and that reflects some of the issues that this committee and Brendan mentioned there. And you've got additional things like developments in climate action, marine spatial planning. You've a whole range of things, so those guidelines need to be kept alive. And then you become a full member of the the institute, if you've got typically 2 years satisfactory post-qualification experience, so you graduate as a graduate member, and then you become a full or a corporate member after 2 years. In terms of the resource issue, yeah, I mean, there's some research from the CCMA, which is that there's in planning in local authorities with the current legislation, rather than the bill going through at the moment, there's a shortage of, I think it's about 541 people in the planning system. That's planners in local authorities, but that's also, I suppose, administrators, other people with relevant urban design qualifications and things like that. A concern that we would have expressed about the current bill is that really it's looking for a whole new skill set in areas like urban design that really aren't necessarily in the country in planners or in other built environment professionals, and that's a concern. And I suppose it's just relevant to that conversation as well is this pipeline issue is across those 3 accredited planning programs, there's about maybe 75 planners coming out every year, and that is to go into Onboard Planala, local authorities, private practice, semi-states, climate action, renewables, a whole range of areas. Many of them are international students going back to other jurisdictions and things like that. So yeah, I mean, certainly we're very alive to the need to increase the skills of planners and make sure that their awareness and understanding of this increases, while also having to deliver other things across a limited number of credits, and then actually keep them in the system and make sure that they're applying the skills in the system as well is something else that we're working to do.
Are we losing them to other countries like we are in so many professions?
There's a shortage of planners really across the English-speaking world, and certainly states in Australia, for example, have been contacting us looking to recruit planners from here as well. So yeah, we're not alone in that issue.
Okay, thank you. And just in the National Disability Authority, I mean, you indicate there that you provide independent and evidence-informed advice to government. Is it accepted, the advice you give, or is there an improved acceptance, would you say, from departments? And the reason I ask that is, again, I often find with some departments, they almost say disability is an issue for the Minister for Disability or the department which it's in, where it's not, it's across the board. And every department and every public body has a responsibility. So I'm just wondering, are you finding an improved acceptance of responsibility to change things?
Yeah, in general, yes. I think again comes back to education and organisations like As I Am and other organisations out there creating awareness of what are the issues, and then ourselves coming in with independent advice to actually say, here's the evidence that we have looked at international best practice, and here's what you should pursue or advance through either legislation or through new regulation. I suppose one of the issues that you brought up in the last question about Part M, it has been a significant piece that we've been talking to the Department of Housing on revising Part M, because it is all about visitable housing. So 2 areas that we've been involved in heavily over the last 18 months is changing places toilets, being now added to the revised Part M, and we're developing national guidance to go to align with that new regulation regarding changing place toilets. The other is working with the National Standards Authority of Ireland on universal design dwellings for homes and apartments. And again, that is, I suppose, to advance the thinking and understanding about better design homes that we would see would inform the revision of Part M. Department of Housing are actually sitting on that working group, which we had another meeting yesterday afternoon, and they are sitting very actively involved in that working group. So, yeah, if we're talking about the built environment, yes, and again, working with professional bodies such as the Royal Institute of Architects. Our next door neighbours are Engineers Ireland. We've sat just in the last couple of weeks, as my colleagues on my right here, on programmatic reviews on engineers and what's happening within engineering courses. So we've now been able to, I suppose, look at the accreditation for chartered engineers, for example, that now a requirement is universal design as a key requirement for a chartered engineer. and we're now developing further criteria with Engineers Ireland. What does that actually mean for student attributes over the next couple of months? So.
Just, I know you said there that the percentage of disabled people employed in the public sector is something that you monitor. Does that include autistic people, or have you any kind of indication of, because I think it's 85% of autistic people are either underemployed or unemployed.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Do you have figures on that specifically?
Not at the present moment in time, but one of the things that we carried out in 2019 was a review of the monitoring and part 5. And one of the things is looking for more disaggregated data to come back from public bodies. So that is something that we're looking at, revising the questionnaire that goes out to public bodies in the autumn to have that figure for, because we're always a year behind the data we get to publish. So for the 2025 data, we should have more disaggregated data on not only the, I suppose, types of people with disabilities work in the public sector, but also what level they are within the public sector, because again, we would have seen that people come in at a base level and then they don't progress through the organisation. So that's another key element that we've got from the feedback, that looking at where are they within the organisation and have they progressed in the whatever previous 18 months or 2 years.
Thank you. Thank you.